Welcome to the church family that is lifting lives through living love, inspiring hope, filling with faith, and transforming our world. These recorded messages are made available so that you might have additional opportunities to stay connected with us, and that you might learn and grow in your faith. God bless you as you hear the word today. And now, the message.
Our scripture reading this morning comes from Genesis, chapter 1, verses 26 through 31. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground." So God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them. Male and female, he created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living thing that moves on the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has the breath of life in it, I give every green plant for food." And it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. May the Lord bless the reading and the hearing of his word.
If you're having a little deja vu this morning, yes, Amber just preached this passage about a month ago, maybe 5 weeks ago. And the reason we're redoing it again today is because we are moving into a new kind of stage as a church where we are shifting, where we want kids to be more part of our worship. So the kids were with us up until, when I dismissed them a little bit ago to go be with Miss Tracy. But also when they are dismissed to their area, we are going to partner with them. So we are studying the exact same stories from the Bible that our kids, that our youth are learning. So when families reconnect at the end of the day, they'll all be studying, talking about the exact same scripture. So we're going to dig back into the creation story this morning. Now, I think sometimes the creation story, it's one of those things that it's so familiar to us, and sometimes we get lost because we end up getting so hyper-focused on the debate that all the culture wars that rage in our country around creation versus evolution, faith versus science, and what does this story have to teach us? And we miss the wider context of the story, what it has to tell us about who God is and who we are, and how we are to live both in relationship to God and how we're also to live in relationship to creation. So I want to kind of revisit the story, and I want to look at it through a particular lens, through the lens of image bearing. That's a phrase that I picked up from Andy Crouch, his book, Playing God, that changed forever the way I see and understand the story of Genesis chapter 1. That's the central claim that Mike just read for us, that on the sixth day, God said, "Let us create humankind in our own image." That we are crafted and designed to bear the image of God. But what does that mean? The thing is the Bible makes this huge claim that human beings are created in the image of God, the Creator. But then it doesn't tell us what that means. Does that mean that God looks like us? Which is kind of like a reverse process, that we depict God to look in our image, right? Like the Sistine Chapel, for instance. How do they depict God? Well, he must be an old white guy with flowing beards, wise and powerful. That must be what God looks like. No, that's not what God looks like. The Bible doesn't even make that claim. In fact, the Bible makes an opposite claim, that God is not flesh and bone, but God is spirit. He is light. He's love. So God doesn't, look like us. So what does it mean to be made in the image of God if it's not a physical image? How are we like God? And it's my claim that God has given us a certain capacity as his image bearers that God gave to no other creature on the face of the earth. And when we understand what that capacity is, when we live into it, that's what it means to faithfully bear God's image in the world. But if we're created in God's image, then a whole bunch of other questions come from that. Amber in her prayer kind of not acknowledged how often we fail to live into that image. So is it possible for us to lose the image of God? And if it's lost, can it ever be recovered? These are the big existential questions we're going to spend the next few weeks talking about. Before I go all that, before we get too deep, I guess, I want to back up and I want to revisit something that Kim preached about a few weeks ago when she was talking about spiritual geniuses. She brought up the work of Patrick Lencioni, Working Geniuses, a tool that our staff has used recently to kind of do staff development and training. This tool was brought to us by Amy Connolly, who's chair of our staff parish relationship committee. And the idea of Patrick Working Geniuses is Lencioni, who's kind of a leadership guru, kind of discerned that there are 6 steps for any idea to go from the initial conception to final execution. 6 specific steps, 6 specific gifts that are needed along that process. And here's how he describes the 6 gifts. He says the first is wonder, which is the gift of pondering possibilities and potential. It has to start with someone who says, what if? What could be, why is it like this, and could it be any different? And after wonder comes the gift of invention, someone who has the gift of creating new ideas and solutions, who throws a bunch of stuff at the wall to see what would stick, right? And after the invention and the brainstorming, the creative process, then comes discernment. Someone who's able to come along and say, out of all these possibilities, they can evaluate the ideas and situations and figure which one is the best possible solution. What's the best possible version of that? And then comes galvanizers, the gift of galvanizing. People who are able to rally a team together, who inspire others to take action. Let's get moving on this, people. And then comes enablement. People who are gifted by helping others, by providing support and assistance so everyone can do their job well and contribute to the task. And finally, you have tenacity. Those who possess the gift of pushing a project or a task to completion, who love deadlines and get projects across the finish line. These are the 6 gifts that Patrick Lencioni, that he identifies as areas of genius. He says, now when you look at this list, these 6 possible gifts you have, he says most people have 2 areas of genius. Things that give them energy and excitement that they love doing. These he calls your area of working genius. He says, and there's probably 2 areas that you've learned to do quite well because of whatever your profession or job might be, or whatever your parents taught you. These are things that you have working competency around. You do them well. They don't necessarily charge your batteries, but you're good at them. And then you probably have 2 areas that are areas of working frustration, that you just hate doing these things. You put them off as low as you can get them on the to-do list. And when you do them, it's begrudgingly and tiringly because they sap you, they drain you. They're your areas of working frustration. So 2 areas of genius, 2 areas of competency, 2 areas of frustration. Now, you may already be able to identify, given the list that I just gave you, what your 2 areas of genius probably are, things that you enjoy doing that you're really good at doing. But there's an assessment if you want to take it. Amy Connolly kind of had our staff take the assessment, maybe 30 questions or so, that kind of help you discern what your areas of genius were. And the fun part about it is then you can take your areas of genius together and it kind of forms like a personality, kind of like Myers-Briggs or any of those other work tools that kind of form a personality. And so there's 16 different combinations. And we were amazed when we started looking at these on our staff, how accurate they were. For instance, Andy Simon, who runs the tech booth, when we took his areas of working genius together, it describes him as a methodical architect, someone who is detail-oriented, a hard worker that gets things done. That's Andy to a T. Or Kim King, when we put hers together, it describes her as a contemplative counselor, which is dead on the nose. I don't even have to read the description. When I saw like what that was, I was like, oh, that's Kim, easily. I am an adaptable designer, someone who comes up with new ideas, but if you encounter resistance, just come up with another one. And so on this little sheet here, it has a description, but then it also has watch out for. And so my watch out for is that I may struggle to identify best solutions and push forward. I'm typically not a hard charger. Anyways, when we kind of looked at these as staff, we thought, oh, wow, those are on the nose. It helped us better understand each other as individuals, but the fun part about it, too, was when we put all these areas of working genius together on our staff, then we were able to see, oh, there's some areas where we have a lot of people who identify that as an area of genius. Like we had a lot of tenacity on our team. It was like, oh, this is a really good thing. But then there were some other areas where we realized, oh, we don't have anyone or very few people who possess that as a genius. In fact, most of us, like for instance, for us, it was the gift of galvanizing. That was something that only 2 out of our whole staff identified as genius, and almost everyone else identifies as frustration. So it helps you as a team figure out where are we strong, where are we weak, and how do we get other people in the mix in order to balance out these areas of genius. Because what the ideal is to have a team where everyone's gifts complement each other's and the genius of creation is recognized across the board. I highly recommend it to anyone who's doing team development, or even if you just want to better understand yourself. So what does this have to do, though, with the biblical story? Well, let me go back to what Andy Crouch taught me about Genesis 1. I told you he changed the way I looked at Genesis 1 forever, and the way he changed it was by paying attention to grammar, which how many of you are wild about grammar, but he points out, and specifically, the grammar of God's speech as God calls forth creation in Genesis chapter 1. He pointed out, for instance, that the words which God speaks to bring forth creation, which we all know what it is, right? What words does God speak at the beginning of each day of creation? He says, "Let there be." And he just made the simple observation that let there be is not a command. It's not an imperative. Make it so. He said that's how we tend to think of power, right? Make it so, make it so, make it so. Like people in power, that's how they get things done. But that is not the way God creates the world. It's not an imperative. Grammatically speaking, it's what's known as a jussive case. God creates space. He gives permission. It's not a command, but a call to which creation freely responds. Let there be light. Let there be darkness. Let there be sea. Let there be land. Let there be sky. God calls and creation responds again and again and again. And reflecting on this, Andy writes, he says, let there be suggests a multiplication of power that is not found in the phrase, make it so. Make it so is a strictly limited and limiting command. The subordinates who are making it so are not expected to make anything else so. Their job is to put into practice the precise decision arrived at by their supervisors, no more and no less. Have any of you ever worked in a make it so culture? Just do your job, keep your head down, don't do anything creative at all, right? He continues, he says, but when the words let there be ring through the universe, they accomplish very literally what they describe, the creation of being where there was none before. New beings come into existence, each with their own capabilities, potential, and sphere of influence. By saying, let there be, the Creator God makes room for more being, for more agents who could utter their own, let it be. And in response to that divine justice, acting in the space opened up by God's creative power, they will engage in their own acts of creativity. Let there be. Vastly different from make it so. This is how God creates the world by making space for the multiplication of power, with the end result that creation would teem and overflow. This is a key phrase in the fifth day of creation. He says, let the waters teem with living creatures. Let birds fly above the earth, across the vault of the sky. Hey, God wants creation to teem, to overflow with abundance and goodness, swarming and teeming. There are things that God blesses in creation, an endless diversity and a possibility in creation, all brought into being by those simple words, let there be. So for 6 days, those words are repeated, let there be, let there be, let there be, let there be. And then at the end of the 6th day, the divine voice changes from let there be, Joseph, to a different case, the cohortative. Let there be becomes let us make. And at this point in creation, God gets his hands dirty down in the mud. It becomes intimate and personal. God is personally involved in the creation of human beings. For he says, let us make in our own humankind, in our own divine image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds of the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground. God created humankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. Let us make. Back to Andy Crouch. He says, this is no distant sovereign decree. It's an intensely personal decision to crown creation with image bearers who will themselves be invited to share their Maker's fruitful dominion over the world. God makes it personal. Let us make. And then finally, after we are made, human beings are made, finally we get a command, an imperative, right? But what's the command that God gives human beings? Is it make it so? No. Is it thou shalt not? Not yet, eventually. But the first command given to us divine image bearers is be fruitful and multiply. He wants us to be agents of teeming in the world. Fill the earth, subdue it. For I give everything, every living creature, everything that has breath unto it, I give it to you. His desire is for us to become agents of teeming, to rule over and subdue creation in order to bring forth the possibilities that God has planted within it. So Andy writes, on the very first page of the Bible then, power, flourishing, image-bearing, they're all connected. Power is for flourishing, teeming, fruitful, multiplying abundance. Power creates and shapes an environment where creatures can flourish. And image-bearing is for power. For it is the Creator's desire to fill the earth with representatives who will have the same kind of delighted dominion over the teeming creatures as their Maker, which means image-bearing is for flourishing. The image-bearers don't exist for their own flourishing alone, but rather to bring the whole creation to its fulfillment. So those are the three movements, primarily speaking, of creation. From let there be to let us make, to be fruitful and multiply. And I love, the reason I spent that time with Lynn Sione at the beginning is to see how his model compares so well to those three movements of creation. What were the first two gifts that he described? The gifts of wonder and invention. These are the gifts that speak, let there be. You know, when you think about it, every creative process in the history of humankind has begun with those words, let there be. Every building, every business, every product, every favorite family recipe that gets passed from generation to generation, every little league team roster, every marriage, every child, every adoption, every medicine, every life-saving device, every procedure, it all begins with someone who says, let there be. Let the world expand to include this possibility. Let the world open up to see what can be. Creativity begins in the jussive mode. And then we move to the next mode, which is let us make. Those are our galvanizers and our discernment. Let us make something together. And this is where, if God, I know God perhaps is speaking in the royal we, but within the Godhead, God still creates and loves within community. And if divine creativity begins in community, guess what? So does our creativity as well. We don't make things on our own. We may have an initial idea or vision, this could be a possibility in the world. But in order to bring any new thing into the world, we very quickly have to gather other people around us to share our ideas, to have those ideas refined and elevated until we reach a higher version of what that original idea first was. So Andy says when we're in this kind of this stage of the creative process, he says, it often looks like meetings after meetings as a core team begins to form and apply their own creativity towards asking what the ultimate highest form of the original idea might become. And what will emerge from those conversations will almost certainly be more fruitful, creative, surprising, and alive than what was envisioned in the pages of the original proposal. We go from let there be to let us make. It takes it up a whole other notch. And then eventually the creative process has to move into be fruitful and multiply. Here's the enablers who are helping people be fruitful. Here's the tenacity who are getting the job done. They take this original vision, this plan of action, and they move it forward. They birth it into reality. Angie says, if we do our job well, we'll hardly ever have to use hard-edged commands like make it so. We'll use them sparingly. More often, we'll just be able to say to people, be fruitful and multiply. Fill the space created by our early vision with your own creativity, with your own gifts. And if they do their task well, the creation, not just your original idea, but the creation as a whole, the creation will be enriched, more useful, more beautiful, more capacious for further creativity. This is power as it was meant to be. So I just want you to think about those three words, or three sets of words, from let there be to let us make, to be fruitful and multiply. Because this is what it means, I think, to be created in the image of God. As image bearers, we are given power, but a specific kind of power. The power to create. Out of all the other creatures that move upon the ground, human beings alone have been given this gift, not just to make stuff. Because you could say beavers make dams and so forth, not just to make stuff, but to make something out of the world. To make meaning with our lives, to ask ultimate questions about who am I and why have I been placed here and what does God want me to do with these days, with this space, with this time I have been given. And to do that faithfully, to live into those questions with all that we are, that is what it means to bear God's divine image, to make something out of our lives. And what I love about the Lencioni model, why I spent so much time on it, is remember what Lencioni was saying, is that no single person possesses all 6 working geniuses. The most anyone has is 2. And so really it's not about developing all your personal gifts, but it's about developing a team where all the gifts and geniuses are present. In the same way, I would suggest that bearing God's image is not something we do in isolation. It's something we can only do in community with others. That's where we bear God's image. And so, yes, you can bear God's image. You can live faithfully, offering the gifts and the particular gifts and geniuses that God gave you. That's part of what it means to bear God's image. No more, no less. But you're also called to recognize, we are also called to recognize the image bearing of those around us, that every single person we know and every single person we meet bears the stamp of the Creator God that is empowered, called by Him to speak their own let there be, to make something of their lives and of the world around them. That's what it means to bear God's image. It's something we do together. Now, we're going to talk next week about the problem of sin and what sin does to the image of God within us and how that problem will ever possibly get fixed. But today, I just want to invite you to live in the gift of the words of creation. Let there be, let us make, be fruitful and multiply. Consider for just a moment that God spoke over you. Let us make. That God said, let us make Penny. And let us make Don. And let us make Garnet. And let us make Dave. God said, let us make you. That you are fashioned in His divine image to reflect and bear His image to others. And you do that by living in the space opened up by His divine let there be. And He calls you to speak your own let there be into the world. If you just let those words resonate and kick around in your soul, what things do you wish to see and bring into the world? And once you're clear what your let there be is, once you're clear who your let us make is together, then, my friends, you are empowered by the divine Creator to be fruitful and multiply, to bring into the world more love, more life, more abundance and goodness to the glory of the Creator, in whose image each of us is created. Amen.
Good morning. My name is Peggy Reef, and I am the administrative assistant here at Zionsville United Methodist Church. Thank you for joining us today. We would love to get to know you more and spend some time with you. If you'd like to know more about our faith community, please visit our church website at zumc.org. There, you'll find the many ministry opportunities we have to offer. If you need to contact one of our staff members, all our contact information is at the bottom of each web page. You can also connect with us via social media throughout your week for daily inspiration and community. You'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube under username Zionsville UMC. Once again, thank you for joining us this morning, and we hope you have a wonderful week.